Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our 11th episode of girlstechtalk. And in this episode, this is our second episode on Azure function and Azure app service. So in this episode, we are going to go in depth, like what are the comparison we should keep on mind while selecting any of these two. So one of the thing I would like to say, that IT is a field where everything is changing. Like we are getting new product each every day, and every product is receiving some update. So when we stick to an architecture or stick to an design, we should always go back and validate like how my design is performing in production environment or in real-time data load. And based on that data load, we should always come back and validate like whether those requirements whether those considerations are making any sense up to that point, because the products are changing as well as the features are also evolving. So we should always have a keen understanding of that performance when it's in the production. And I would just like to add one point, like it's more about every design decisions that we are taking, that should always take care of the business need that I am solving. Means design is always crucial, but when we are designing from Azure, it's very mandatory that we remember the business scenario that we are trying to solving. So as we have come across a bit of tabular comparison, like when we are going for Azure functions and when it's wise to select Azure App Service. So let's hear from it from Tara. So Tara, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Rima. So before starting into actually going into the pointers evaluation decision topics, I would like to say it's not only uh, in the business side or from the architectural side that they have to decide it, but from a developer's perspective also. And developer also, you should think about these decisions, whether these decisions which has been made actually making sense at implementation level or not. So that is also one thing, and there is no problem in keeping up your ideas or keeping up your decisions to the senior level. So why I'm saying this, because when someone work at the full bigger picture, they sometimes miss the actual implementation details, which a dev can actually understand and give that details about, right? So it's always a good idea to think from your level as well, and then share those ideas with everyone in the team. So I'll just share this slide which we had made specifically, as we promised earlier, that we will show it in a more detailed comparison. So yeah. So right now, as we have said in our earlier discussion as well, that this comparison is specifically for function apps which are HTTP trigger versus Azure app services. So why we are comparing these? Because whenever there is a API, REST API or Web API or the whole backend application, we have to understand which of the Azure provider PaaS services is going to be best suiting for your requirement. So that's what we had tried to come up with. This is kind of a very basic yet crucial decision maker pointers, which you can at least go through when you are trying to decide whether you want to go through Azure function apps or app services. Now, for Azure app services, it's always suggested by Microsoft to go at least standard plan or above in production like scenario. So we are going to compare with app services standard plan and above. And for Azure functions, we'll go through all three plans, which are consumption plan, premium plan, and app service plan. Now again, app service plan of Azure function is pretty much same as app services. The difference is app services is a whole lot of facilities which it gives or features which it gives, whereas function app is only just the function app. But the most popular plan among function apps is the consumption plan, I guess, which almost everyone is aware of. And whenever we think from cost perspective that we are going to save cost if we are using function apps, it's only in terms of consumption plan. Premium plan comes towards at little bit costlier side, and it's pretty much at the same level as an Azure app service plan. So when we compare it, you just when it's in terms of like cost, you are going to get inclined towards consumption plan. So the first thing I'll go towards is security concerns. Now in we are in a state where almost everything is on internet, all your services, your application, everything is on internet. And when the customers move to cloud or the business move to cloud, their first concern comes for security. So when we come to this, consumption plan doesn't provide that much flexibility or that much features in terms of security. So you're not going to get virtual network integration, you're not going to get outbound restrictions and all this stuff. Whereas in premium plan, you are going to get all these features in function apps as well as in app service plan. And obviously in app services, Azure app services, you are going to get this feature. So in terms of security, if you understand that your service which you want to host either in either of these as your provided resources, you have to understand whether security is a concern for you or not. So if it's not a concern or security is not a priority for your service, then you can choose consumption plan. Otherwise, maybe premium plan or app services will be a better option to choose to. Then come the second and most uh, deciding factor is the cost. So as I said earlier, also consumption plan is the one which is going to be the cheapest, but there are several conditions. If your application takes lots of requests, like it's maybe if it's exposed to some external application or exposed to some other development team or even with your development team, and then it comes like there are lots and lots of requests comes, then it is not going to be that cost effective because it comes with like with each request it considers the cost, so it is not going to benefit you over there. But if your service is something which runs in a very limited number of request and the load is low at only some point of the year or some point of the month the load gets increased, but rest of the year it just stays idle, in that case consumption plan is a really good option for you to choose to. So that is another factor which you can think of when you are comparing among all these. uh, the third thing is the scaling features. So when actually we want to move to cloud, I think scaling is something which almost everybody wants to get from these cloud resources, right? So when the client tries to move to cloud, they always think that we are going to get this auto scaling based on load and all those stuff. But then again, you have to understand like all these different resources or all these different plan provides different kind of scaling feature. So for an example, in consumption plan, you even don't have to worry about scaling. Even there is not going to be any extra cost for scaling feature. So if, as I said, like when you are considering the cost or when you are considering which plan you have to take to, if your application is something which takes load at certain point of the time or in a year, in a month, then you can choose consumption plan because you don't have to worry about scaling by yourself. Azure itself is going to take care of the scaling. Whereas in premium plan, again, Azure is going to take care of the scaling, but those scale going to get you into extra cost. So it's like whenever there is an extra scaled instance that is going to cost you as per the extra plan. So that is going to be there. And whereas in app services, scaling is not going to give you any extra cost, but there you have to configure all the scaling factors. So if it's something like your development team is aware of, or they can take the configuration setup from their end, like they can actually understand at what like based on what features or based on what requirements you can scale up or scale down your application, then you can definitely go with app services, because it is going to cost lesser with respect to consumption plan, even if you do this scaling configuration mindfully. So that is again one thing. The fourth thing is more on a development perspective. So as I said, when someone is thinking from the bigger picture, maybe this is not going to be a criteria, but when you are actually implementing these services, right, or you are migrating these services, you have to think how easy it is going to be to move to function apps versus app services. Because uh, from the developer's perspective, if your team is more aligned towards .NET framework development, or like your team has like extensively worked with .NET framework since years and years, in that case, maybe app services will give you a better ease towards the development. Whereas for function apps, it's even though it has like it has become a very mature resource, still among the .NET developers, I don't think it is like that much like it's that much familiar with all the development teams. So you have to think in a little bit in a different manner, because it totally works kind of in a microservices fashion. So that is something like there is a kind of culture change in the development, the way function apps works. So if your team is someone who actually has worked with .NET framework since quite a lot years, and you know that they can actually take care of the full application in with that .NET pattern and with that .NET platform, then maybe you can think of app services. Because ultimately, as we have said in our earlier season also, that you should not be creating a mess of function apps just because you had to create the function apps. So if your application is heavy or your backend is heavy with the services, and your developer knows that there are lots of duplication of code going to be there, then app services is way better option than function apps. Then comes uh, the fifth pointer, and maybe the last pointer among these decision making points, is how much effective your service you want to be. By effective, I mean from the performance wise, like when a request hits to your service, how fast you need that processing to be done. Because when you are choosing consumption plan, cold start is a very known issue which comes up. So it's like if your function app, since it's a serverless, and serverless is nothing but the server is going to get assigned dynamically. So when your service is, or when your function app is idle, it is going to deallocate all the resources. And when a new request hit to that service, then it start allocating the resources. The Azure try to start allocating the resources. So with consumption plan, what happens that a request hit to your service, it start allocating the resources, and it takes some time for your service to actually boot up and actually get warm and start processing. So if your service is something like maybe directly visible to client side, then obviously you don't want that to be happening, right? You need it to be like just be ready whenever there is a request, it should process and then send the response. So in such situation where you cannot take this processing delay or processing uh, lag, you just cannot take that, then you should not be going with consumption plan. Specifically, if there are like uh, third party or any kind of external factors which has to load for the service to be processing any of the request. Whereas premium plan will be good in this situation, that you want, that you know that function app is a good suited for your service, but still you don't want to like battle with cold start issues, then premium plan is going to be best. And ultimately, when it comes to app services, we have said this earlier as well. If you know that your whole application itself is a big one, and then you just know that there are lots of repetitive business code or like business functionality, which you know that is going to get used in multiple places, and then you know that there will be duplication of code if you write function app, or duplication of functionality in fact, then you should be going up with app services. You should write your full-fledged application and host it in app services, because it is going to actually host your whole application. It's not just like single functions or kind of microservices. So these are few of the things which you should definitely consider. Apart from that, obviously there will be several factors based on your requirement or your scenario, but these are few of the basic factors which we wanted to discuss about. I had added few more slides which are just like what all features are provided by different plans of function app. So as I said, like if your security is a concern for you, you cannot go with consumption plan because it doesn't provide any of these security features, inbound rule, outbound, virtual network integration and all. Whereas premium plan and ASC dedicated, all these plans provides you with all these security features. And as I said about premium plan versus a premium plan of function app versus your app services. So if you see, it's pretty much kind of cost wise, it's pretty much same. When it's like 0.173 CPU per hour plan is there for premium of function app. In app services, it's around 20. So that in that case, when you see that you are actually comparing between Azure app services versus function app premium plan, you can think of other factors and you can compare other factors to decide your decision among all these. So yeah, that's all I wanted to give you an insight about the comparison. And Shima, it's back to you if you want to add something.
I think we have covered almost everything that we wanted to discuss, but I just wanted to summarize that we have seen cost, one of the factor, and then cold start is one of the factor, like how effective we want to give response to that functionality. So, and security. So if these are the three pillars, I would say that we actually check. If these are the concerns, then select which one. And obviously, as business is always, what problem we are trying to solution, how frequently I will be getting it, and how frequently I have to respond. Those are the things we always consider it. Um, so I would say, like, as we already discussed in our previous episode also, like we should always believe on responsible design. When I say like responsible, what are the parameters are affecting for it? If security is very crucial for our application, then we cannot compromise it with this. But if it is just an, for example, like in a girlstechtalk web page, everyone just want to see it or how it was. So in that case, we are not worried about the content or worried about the security. So I would say like, yeah, we can do it. We can host the page in a function app, or we can host the web API and see how the free plan works. So that's how we select, and that's how we are we design application. So that's it for the day.
Yeah.
And
Thanks
thanks.
everyone. Thanks for watching. Bye.